to everyone. Thank you for attending this first session on research ethics and defense. But especially, thank you very much to Catherine for having made yourself available to be with us today. The issues around research and defense have gained a particular importance in the present geopolitical scenario, and it's worth noting that the European Commission is considering to change its previous policy and have dual-use projects within the 10th Framework Programme. It's why it's so important to discuss these topics and neighbor topics that have to do with security and this other thing. And we look forward to listening to Catherine's talk, the title of which is "My Facial Recognition System is 100% Accurate. Is it a good news?" Well, Catherine Tessier is a director of research of ONERA in Toulouse, France, and ONERA's research integrity and ethics officer. Among other things, she's also a member of the French National Committee for Digital Ethics and a member of the French Defense Ethics Committee. So there couldn't be a better choice to inaugurate these talks. At the end of her talk, you can put forward questions or comments, just raise your hand. And we would like to limit the duration of the session to around 1 hour. I remind you that if someone doesn't want to be recorded, because the session will be recorded, please don't use the camera and use the chat to communicate, because the chat will not be recorded. And so, thank you very much again, Catherine. The floor is yours.
Pedro, good evening to everybody. I'm very glad to be with you today. And well, I'm going to share my presentation. Okay, so can you?
Yes.
Can you see? Okay. So yes, my title is a bit funny, or so I'm going to explain that later on. Let's begin with some papers and things that come in the press. And let's begin by the right side. You can see here two papers that have been that were issued, some scientific papers that were issued some years ago. And you can see that, well, it's a bit strange. The first one, deep neural networks are more accurate than humans at detecting sexual orientation from facial images. And from the same author, facial recognition technology can expose political orientation from naturalistic facial images. So we can see here that those kind of researchers, of course, raise deep ethical issues, and well, nevertheless, they are published, and well, it's like that. So we are going to discuss a bit about that. What I would say here is that on the first hand, they raise ethical issue, but on the other hand, they also raise research integrity issues. So that's a bit worrying, of course. And on the left side of the slides, you can see well, press articles. And again, it's about the face recognition. So you can see the first one, US Air Force is giving military drones the ability to recognize faces. So we can ask ourselves, what for? And at the bottom of the slide, you can see Ukraine has started using Clearview AI's facial recognition during war. So perhaps you have heard about this. It was more than 2 years ago. So we are going to discuss all those issues. So the questions, it's about my title, but what if facial recognition systems were perfectly accurate? Researchers what they want is to have what they call a perfectly accurate systems, and especially facial recognition systems. But if this kind of system is perfectly accurate, wouldn't that raise more ethical issues with respect to the fact that if they are not accurate and perfectly accurate, of course, this raises issues, but perhaps they will be less used than perfectly accurate ones. So that we will discuss that. So a quick reminder about what ethics is about. So first of all, what the ethics is not. So ethics is not the law. So the law, of course, are rules of conduct and comes from sovereign authority. For instance, I have put here the EU AI Act, of course, which has been adopted several months ago. Ethics is not staff regulations. So what are staff regulations? That is a bunch of rights and duties that come from an organization, school, university, etc. And ethics is not deontology. So deontology is the code of conduct that comes from a profession. So I've put here the code of conduct for research integrity in Europe. So that's the code of conduct. The researchers that who participate in, for instance, I have issues with the mics that are not turned off, I think. So there is some echoes. So this code of conduct has to be adopted by researchers who apply for European funds in European projects, for instance. So ethics is not like that. So what ethics is a thought, a reflection, which can be personal or more often collective. And this thought, this reflection is about human behaviors and values they are based on. So ethics is to wonder, to raise questions about topics, situation, and possible decision and actions. And what is important is that all that has to be done along the way. It's not that you do ethics and then it's done and you forget about it. No, you have to think about that all along your scientific or technological project, and always ask new questions along the way of your project. So it's an approach that aims at behaving or acting at best. It's not the best possible, but at best is in a specific context. What's important here is that ethics is always in context. It's not like that, independent from a project or a specific context of application. No, it has to be applied in a specific context. And if you have to make decisions or to do actions, what is important is to put forward the arguments. That's very important. On which arguments your decisions or actions are based. And those arguments are based on values, or more often when they are conflicting values or dilemmas, on scales of values. So ethics does not command, that's why ethical rules does not mean anything. In fact, there are no rules in ethics, but ethics recommends. And the ethical debate is based, in fact, on conflicts between values. So, in a nutshell, ethics is different, or in English, more than compliance, because the French and English meaning of ethics is quite different. That's very interesting. In English, ethics also means compliance. But what we are going to talk about this evening is ethics as a thought, and not as compliance rules. So saying what should or should not be done is not sufficient. Ethics is a continuous thought, and it evolves all the time, especially as techniques evolve. And ethics has to do with situations that are called dilemmas. And a dilemma is a situation where a decision is not compliant. That's very interesting. And you have to make trade-offs. So what I've done here is that I've taken a translation of something that is extracted. What's that? Something that is extracted from a report of the National Committee, Ethics Committee in France. And what is interesting here is that with those sentences, we can see the different elements, the different items that are relevant to have an ethical thought. So what is said here is that ethics is a collective deliberation, always to be resumed, so it does not stop. And it must make the difference between what is possible and what is acceptable. So that's the first element of a guide. What is the difference between the possible and the acceptable? When, as researchers, we deal with, of course, we must produce new knowledge. And this new knowledge complicates or shifts the scope of our questioning, and it often increases our uncertainties. So the second point of the guide is to identify which scientific uncertainties we have. And then we have to question the values and the principles that define the very notion of progress. So, the progress, okay, we talk about scientific progress. So, but according to which principles, to which values? And each time this progress is invoked, we must critically analyze the certainties and convictions that underlie it. So very often we have certainties and convictions, and the point is to identify them and to criticize them. And this critical analysis must be based first on the values and second on the most lucid possible assessment of the benefits and risks. So here you have the two main, in fact, frameworks for reasoning when doing an ethical deliberation. You have values on the first hand, that is what we call a deontological way of thinking, and then the benefits and risks, that is the effects, so that the consequence of the techniques or of the device, and that's the consequentialist approach. And the last sentence says that, well, in fact, the values have to be articulated with one another to find the best possible balance, because very often those values and principles cannot be met at the same time and they come into competition. So you have to articulate that or to scale them in order to make a decision. So we are going to apply this, and I'm going to use my example of facial recognition, and we are going to make together a very short ethical deliberation, ethical thinking. Of course, an ethical thinking must be long. You cannot have an ethical thinking in 5 minutes or even in an hour. No, it must be long. You have to take time to think about the different issues, the different arguments, etc. You have to confront the ideas of everybody, and you have to identify dilemmas and to discuss a lot, etc. So very often when you have an opinion that is written inside a National Ethics Committee, it most often takes several months and even several years to be written. So of course we cannot, of course, do an ethical thinking in several minutes, but I will try. So to sum up the different items that I've already explained in a previous slide, in order to have an ethical deliberation, we have to identify paradoxes. We have to think according to a deontological viewpoint. That is to say, in the name of what are we going to research that techniques or design such a device? What are the values? What are the principles behind them? What things are possible and what things are acceptable? And if things are acceptable or not, according to which point of view? We have to identify scientific uncertainties and our own certainties and convictions, our beliefs, and then reason from a consequentialist viewpoint, that is to say, identify consequences, so the effects of the techniques, of the device, etc., in a particular context, and what the benefits and risks are. And then to identify tensions. I will make a remark here. As far as the AI Act is concerned, if you read it, you can see that it has been written only from a consequentialist viewpoint, and all the other possible frameworks are completely forgotten in that. So it's only a consequentialist viewpoint. So that's a pity, perhaps. So, first of all, paradox. What is interesting with the facial recognition is that it creates either an overestimation of dangers, or an underestimation of dangers, and most often at the same time. So overestimation, for instance, people will focus on the use of data, personal data, whereas in Europe, for instance, well, there are legal safeguards, especially in the GDPR and now in the AI Act too. And at the same time, there is an underestimation of dangers. For instance, there is a lack of awareness of tracking methods, especially by private companies. If you have a facial recognition system sold by a private company, and especially a non-sovereign private company, well, you don't know what they do with your data, and well, you can be tracked. Think, for instance, of social media. Well, you're tracked from your faces, and you don't know what they do with them. So that's a kind of a paradox. So people think that there is overestimate danger and at the same time underestimate danger. So that's kind of a paradox. So let's turn to the deontological point of view. So the corresponding sentence I focused on is question the principles that define the very notion of progress. So let's do the exercise on our facial recognition system. So, of course, those kind of systems increase scientific knowledge. Yes, of course, it's a scientific research, and researchers try to always improve the performance of those kind of systems. So, yes, it increases scientific knowledge. So, okay. As far as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are concerned, so I've reviewed them, and I focused on the 11th one, which reads, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So there is the question of safety. So do the facial recognition systems increase safety in cities? Well, it's a question. We don't know exactly. They are said to increase safety, but is it true? Well, it has to be demonstrated. Increased security, same question. So they are said to increase security, but are there evidence of that, scientific evidence of that? And as far as defense is concerned, have more accurate weapons? Well, maybe. So facial recognition systems could help to have more accurate weapons, but again, it has to be proved. Okay, and of course, you can have many more questions like that. So then we are always, from the deontological point of view, an interesting sentence is make the difference between what is possible and what is acceptable. So here I've detailed a bit which kind of purposes the facial recognition system can be used for. It can be used for authentication. Authentication is matching one photograph, for instance, with another photograph of the person. So, for instance, to unlock your smartphone or to access to restricted areas. So, unlock your smartphone. What is the principle behind it is privacy. Only you can unlock your smartphone, and that's why you put your smartphone in front of your face, and as you have registered your face, well, the smartphone can recognize that the person who is unlocking the smartphone is you. Okay, so that's a privacy principle. Access to restricted area. So, for instance, access to a university or a company, and instead of having a badge, you have the facial recognition systems. So that's a matter of security. So the principle behind it is security. And you could have, well, target this particular person in the defense domain. Of course, so you have the military have gathered photographs of a particular person, and then this photograph is inside the facial recognition system that is embedded in the weapon, and the weapon will make the matching between what the weapon perceives and the photographs. And so the weapon could target this particular person. So the principle behind is perhaps accuracy of the weapon. So that was for the authentication function. Another function of a facial recognition system is identification. So what is in the identification is to recognize one person among several persons. So, for instance, in the street. Okay, so you have several applications of that. Photos on social media. So the principle behind is business. You can identify someone in a public place, for instance, for search, for assistance, for security, or perhaps for according to a special ideology. And you can have in the military domain target this particular person in a public space, again, according to the principles of accuracy. And the last main function of this facial recognition system is to categorize people. Categorize people is to discriminate between people according to some specific criteria among a set of people. So, for instance, and not to be too politically incorrect, let us discriminate people in a crowd wearing glasses, for instance, according to a certain ideology. And in the military domain, of course, you could have a system targeting all people wearing glasses according to the same principle. So all that is possible, but what is acceptable? So the question is raised. I have no answer or correct answer, but what is acceptable? And in particular, I have put red question marks, and all the question marks raise the question, is that acceptable or not? And according to what? Is it acceptable or not? And of course, if we had facial recognition systems everywhere, well, we could detect and recognize everybody. And again, that is, of course, possible, but is that acceptable? And if yes, or if no, according to which principles and values? Okay, of course, ethics does not get direct answers. We have to think and debate about that. So I will not give answers. Then scientific uncertainties and beliefs we have. So critically analyze the certainties and convictions. Again, I've taken again the three possible functions of facial recognition systems. As far as authentication is concerned, well, what is the certainties we have and the convictions we have is to increase verification speed. Well, yes, it could be, yeah. Identification increases public health, public order, protects people and property. Is that true? Well, we don't know exactly. We have to have that are beliefs, convictions, but is it grounded on scientific experiments? Well, that is a question. And categorize, of course, in the same thing, increase public health, order, protect people. Well, we don't know. So all that has to be confirmed by scientifically grounded experiments, and not only on, well, we believe that it will increase public order, for instance. Yes, but it is not grounded. So we have to give evidence of that. Then let's come to the consequentialist point of view. So the assessment of the benefits and risks. So, of course, there are many effects of such a system. So again, these are some examples. So as far as benefits are concerned, consequences to verify quickly. Yes, as far as your smartphone is concerned, yes, it's quicker to have your facial recognition system than to type the code, to dial the code. Okay. Find someone quickly. Yes, you can find someone more quickly with the facial or postural or behavioral recognition in a crowd, for example. Increased security. Well, we don't know. We have to have evidence about that. Reduce human work. Well, maybe. So it reduces human tasks as far as the number of humans involved. Instead of having human workers verifying everybody in the street and tracking everybody in the street, you have cameras. Yes, but you have people behind the cameras and stop examining the images. So does this reduce human work or not? Well, that is a question. In the middle, I've put some effects that are neither benefits nor risk that may be considered. Such systems results in changes in social behaviors. You can have that especially in China, where people either try to comply with the system or escape the system with, for instance, special makeups or something like that. And another question that is worth studying here is proportionality between the number of people who are tracked to find one person. So is it proportional or not? That has to be discussed. And the risks, well, of course, there are many risks at different scales. So you have a gradual habituation of people. Nowadays, you have cameras everywhere in the streets, in the railway stations, in the airports, well, everywhere, and we don't see them anymore. In fact, we are used to them. Okay. Collection of sensitive information, so that is a risk because, well, the facial traits and are personal data, of course. And you could collect emotions, you could collect items related to your social origins or your country of origins or your religions or something like that, and you know that those data are considered as sensitive data in Europe, according to the GDPR. And you could, of course, have a cross-referencing of data. So the data collected by those facial recognition systems could be cross-referenced with other data on social media, for instance. And of course, there are other uses than the system was designed for, and of course, misuses. So, for instance, detection of emotions, generalized surveillance, and in the military system, in the military domain, precision targeting. And what we have to wonder about is the questions where, in the situation where such a system will be linked automatically with an automated decision system, an automated decision and action system. And in which framework would that be okay, and in which framework would that not be okay? For instance, this system could be automatically linked with a system to open a door. Well, doesn't seems to raise special ethical issues. So you arrive in front of the door, you have your facial recognition system, and if you are authorized to go into the building, well, the door opens. So, okay, it seems to be okay. Unlock phone, well, it seems to be okay. Discriminate people, well, is that okay? Target people, well, is that okay? So you can see that when there is an automated link with an automated decision and action, it's not always bad, but it can be a situation where, well, there are many huge ethical issues that are raised. And the last point is that, well, there are tensions between the values, the principles, etc. So we have to find balance when there are intentions. So, for instance, as far as our facial recognition systems are concerned, there are tensions between the usefulness of those systems and their consequences. For instance, proportionality. There are tensions between security in the city, for instance, and individual and collective freedom. There are tensions between accuracy and private life and personal data protection. The more accurate the system is, the more it will have a consequence on your private life and data protection, of course. And more generally, there are tensions between accuracy and, of course, environment preservation, because the more the systems, so the so-called AI systems or automated learning, machine learning systems are, the more they will have an impact on the environment, especially to train the system. The energy needed is very huge. And you have more general tensions between decision aid systems, so-called autonomous systems, and the operators or users' autonomy, the real autonomy. The increase of device capabilities and the preservation of human skills, and of course, off-the-shelf solutions or commercial solutions and sovereignty of those systems that are more general tensions. So, to be more general on research ethics. So here are some questions that each researchers should ask themselves. Who suggested the research topics? For instance, if you are a PhD student, is it your PhD advisor? If you are a researcher in general, is it the funding organization, and which one? Is it the boss? Is it me? Why is this topic worth researching? What are the motivations? What are the values behind? Is that scientific motivations, societal motivation, financial motivation, commercial motivation, strategic motivations? What is my own interest in this topic? Again, what are my motivations? There are many motivations. I like the topic. I like to join a renowned team. The lab is in a nice city. I have international opportunities. I have professional opportunities, and so on. Who employs and pays me and gives me contracts? And what about my independence of mind, especially when I'm funded by a military contract, for instance? So what about my independence of mind? And of course, there are possible conflicts between my personal ethics as a person or as a citizen, and professional ethics as a researcher. And how to solve this conflict? Well, it's up to you. I have no answer. So it is a very personal point of view here. Then once we have our research topic, well, there are some ethical questions that are linked to technical things. So if you design a software or a digital device or a so-called autonomous device, so what is intended to be assigned to this software or device? That is to say, which functions are going to be designed and why? In the name of what are we going to automate such functions? And is it always possible to express those functions with mathematical concepts, and therefore to program them? I will take a small example here. For instance, some researchers have claimed that it was possible to automate the international humanitarian law. That is to say, the principles in the military of military interest, of proportionality, of discrimination, and etc. But the fact is that the IHL is not very precise about those concepts, and that is on purpose. In fact, it is in fact the human and the commander who decide whether an action is proportional, whether the discrimination principle is respected or not, etc. So in fact, it cannot be automated because it is not well defined. You cannot translate those concepts into mathematical concepts. So you cannot program them or to program them properly. So is it possible to catch and encode all the subtleties of those functions? And if this modeling of reality scientifically sound, that is to say, if is the model of the world you put in the system corresponds to reality or not? And furthermore, what is the subjectivity that is put into the models and that is in the data? Is it well identified? So again, we have written a small article on facial recognition systems and try and identify where all the subjectivity of the designer could take place, in fact, in those systems. And then what about the use and future use of our technique that we have designed, that we have researched, or the device, the prototype that we have designed? So what are the intended uses of this software or device or prototype? Is such a software or device desirable for those uses, and in the name of what? And what are so that's again, that's a deontological point of view, and consequentialist point of view. What are the potential side effects and misuses of this software or device? And of course, the big question is, can a researcher anticipate all uses and all effects? Well, in fact, the answer is yes and no, a part of it, but not all. And again, what are their responsibilities with respect to the possible uses and the effects? And last question here, what are the conflicts, how are the conflicts between the principle of requirements handled? For instance, when the AI Act says that there should be a human control of an AI system, well, that's a bit of a paradox, because if we design an AI system that is to automate a certain amount of functions, so put the human away, and at the same time, you have to have a human control. So that's a bit of a paradox. So how are you going to handle this kind of paradox? And then we have to raise questions about the end users of the system. So will they be informed and trained about what the system does, what it does not do, what it does not replace? Are there going to be clear cautions about how to use the device and software? For instance, how to use a facial recognition system properly for a particular application? And can the software or device explain to the user what it is doing and why, etc.? Has the impact of the software or device on the user been assessed? To explain that, to what extent is it likely to modify behaviors on the user and more generally on the humans positively? So that's the intended behavior on the system, and negatively, so to the detriment of what? And who controls what is inside the software, especially code and data? So where are data stored, for instance, and is the user aware of that? So many ethical questions, and you can see here that ethical questions are very tightly interwoven with technical questions, in fact. So to sum up, so some recommendations. So the first thing is that the human is very consequentialist, but we should avoid to think only in a consequentialist way and a utilitarian way. So ask ourselves also, in the name of what are we going to design this, to research this topic, to use this kind of device, etc. Question the motivations of this research, of this device. Is it to increase knowledge? Is it to help people, and which people? Is it to develop industry? Is it to do as others do? It is often a motivation. The others do that, so, well, let's do that too. Is it to believe that a device is better than nothing, which can be a reason, also a motivation, etc. So many motivations can be called here. Question the criteria, such as we are in a time where to be quick is considered as a good thing. But it has to be questions. So we have to question the fact to be quicker, to be cheaper, to be more accurate, to increase security, to involve less human, etc. All that criteria have to be questions. Why do we want to be quicker, cheaper, with less human, but with a human control, etc., etc. Question the needs. Are there real needs or invented needs? And of course, as far as technical questions are concerned, question the choices in algorithms. There are many points of choices in algorithms, so parameters, thresholds, etc. So why do we make such choices? And then the last one, I think. So in fact, I was a member of the UNESCO ad hoc expert group for the drafting of this recommendation of the ethics of artificial intelligence. And one of the article is that member states should ensure that AI, of course, it is AI researchers, but that's all for any researchers, in fact, are trained in research ethics and require them to include ethical consideration in their designs, products, and publications, especially in the analysis of data sets they use, how they are annotated, and the quality and scope of the results with possible implications. So that holds, in fact, for any researcher. So everybody should be trained in ethical thinking. So students, researchers, engineers, companies, decision makers, policymakers, users, etc. So it's not, again, a matter for ethics experts or philosophers or ethics officers. It's a matter for everybody. And ethical thinking should always be associated with research projects. So that's please note that the case for European projects. In fact, you have to associate ethical thinking with your technical developments. So research projects, master thesis, doctoral thesis, etc. And every scientific paper should include an ethical discussion. We are very far from that at the time, but maybe it will improve. And an important takeaway for, if I may, is that in fact, ethical issues are tightly interwoven with scientific issues, and an ethical issue, in fact, can lead to new scientific development. So there's not ethics on the one side and techniques on the other, but all that is, in fact, interwoven. And if you raise ethical issues, well, you can think of developments that will perhaps not solve the ethical issues, but improve the ethical consequences and the ethical issues in your design. So I think that's it. So I will stop.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there is a round of applause that you don't listen because they are muted, but applauding their name. It was great. It was great. Now I open for some questions or comments from the audience. Please raise your hand if you want to intervene. Let's see. Cristina Ribeiro, please.
Sorry, Pedro, I was just clapping my hand, but and thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciated that recommendation on ethics being for everybody, for the students, for the PhD, for the PI, for everybody. So I think that would be my first question for you. And thank you very much. This was very enlightening.
Thank you.
Olivio?
Okay, thank you for the great presentation. So I have one question about the dimension of power and the concentration of power, and how this interacts with also the impact of artificial intelligence in particular. So how if we can deal better with the impacts of artificial intelligence if we take care of the distribution of power. So who owns the technology, who dictates what the technology is, and who uses it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great question, of course. And I think we have to train our students especially to think about that, because they tend to use tools such as ChatGPT and other things like that without thinking, of course, of what they are really doing. That is to say, well, in fact, when typing a prompt in ChatGPT, all what you are typing, in fact, goes to OpenAI, and they will use what you put in your prompt for training again the system. So I think we have to train, especially our young students, about that. So to think about which kind of tool they are using, and what the consequences of what they do are. So it's not to forbid to put something that is forbidden. That's not the point. But to think about, well, I'm using a non-sovereign tool, and so which questions are raised with that? And so maybe we have to, well, we have several other models in Europe that are available. So maybe we should turn to more sovereign tools and think about that, especially in research where we, by definition, we design things that do not exist, that are original. So if we use tools such as ChatGPT that are open, that are to, for instance, to improve programming or things like that, we are likely to put in ChatGPT original things that by definitions have not been published. And well, there's a problem of intellectual property, for instance. So I think we have to train our students to think a bit about that, about this.
Okay, thank you.
I think I have myself, not really a question, but a point I'd like to raise. When you said that the ontological viewpoint, name of what, values, principles, the main problem is that frequently you have values and principles on both sides, conflicting sides.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision. In my opinion, there is also the issue that you don't, even if you could prove they worked, you don't trust the institutions enough to believe that they are used strictly for what they are aiming at, and you are afraid that possibly there is an incredible temptation of using those things beyond the main purposes. So this...
Sure. Yeah, especially if I take again the example of facial recognition systems, for instance, if airports are going to use those kind of systems, the purpose that is published is that it is to improve the so-called people's experience with the airport and something like that. But there are hidden purposes, as you said. that is to track the people, and so on, even for business, etc. But this is not made public. And many companies are like that, because they will publish their values, etc., and purposes of their products. But in fact, very often there are hidden purposes. And that's the case for Google, Microsoft, etc. So they promise you many things that are very convenient to use, etc. But of course, there are more or less hidden purposes, that is business, and reuse your data to make business and money, in fact.
Yeah. We all think that the problem of backdoors is not only with Huawei. It's something that probably is more common in many.
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's very common.
Alipio?
Okay, Vasco has a question. So since I already asked one, I give the floor to Vasco.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you very much. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Brilliant as always. I would like, and building on this previous question from Pedro, and also on the previous question from Alipio, it is true that nowadays, in many occasions, researchers are not really so much involved in the process of designing and planning what will be the ultimate purpose of technologies. So, and there is in these times of geopolitical turbulence in Europe, there is a top-down approach that calls for more investment, for example, in the military, which is in defense and security, which is the topic of our conversation. And so, and of course, there is this technopolitic behind the definition of objectives for research. And so, how do you think this puts the researcher in an ethical dilemma, of course, which is part of his job? But how do you think that in these times, a researcher should think and behave in face of that dilemma?
Well, again, you have to have an ethical debate with yourself and identify the values. That is to say, well, a country needs defense. A country needs security, of course. But on the other hand, well, you can have, as a citizen, as a person involved in such and such organization, as a person, well, you can have other values that are likely to conflict with those other purposes or values. So what is your own position? So you have to think about that. I have no answer, of course. It's a personal answer of everybody, but you have to put on the table every values and try and not to forget anything. And because I have some colleagues saying, well, defense, the military is bad. Well, yes, but why? Can you elaborate on that? Why is it bad? And consider the defense and consider something. So you have to put all the arguments on the table and then debate with colleagues, with other people, or with yourself, and see what is my position. So if my position is to say, well, I don't want to make a research that ultimately will be used for the military because I have such and such values. Well, my position is, well, maybe I will change jobs. Maybe. It happens with one of PhD students at my institution, and I have a talk with this person, and because of this precise dilemma, and he decided to give up his PhD in fact, because personally, he wouldn't able to work on a topic that will at the end be used by in a military device. So he decided to give up. So that was his position. But that's a very personal consideration. But you have to consider all the arguments, if possible.
No, and the institutions, the academic institutions, should of course respect that and that
Yes,
positioning. I think
if possible. Yes, yes, if possible.
Thank you, Catherine. Now I'll pass the floor to Olivia. That is the way.
Thank you, Vasco. So you mentioned, Catherine, that theses and papers should have an ethical discussion, and in paper, for example, I can imagine an ethical section, which cannot be very long because the papers usually have a limited space. So what would you suggest as a general structure for such a section? What should be the points, the checklist for such a section?
So maybe you could use the small guide. Well, it's not the guide, but of course it could help. And the point is to have points of discussions. But there is always more or less a discussion in the paper, and this could be part of the discussion section in the paper. So what are the limits of my work, and what issues could be raised with my work? Can I imagine the uses of this work and the misuses of this work? And of course, we have not an answer for everything, but at least raise the questions could be interesting, I think.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, the PhD advisors have to be trained, of course, doing this exercise, because otherwise it's not possible.
We all have to be trained.
Gabriel David?
Yes. Catherine, currently there are increasing numbers of programs financing for military research, directly or indirectly. Do you know of institutional policies from universities, from large research institutes, about whether to participate or not in directly military funding for research?
Well, in fact, I don't know. Well, it depends on the policy of your country. In fact, as far as I know, in France, by the law, some research institutes and some universities must participate in the military research effort. You know, it's by the law, and of course, some individual researchers may not agree with that, but as an institution, they must. In fact, they must participate. So it's written in the law, more or less. So you have to check with your own law and see. And see whether you have to or not. I had no answer for your country, of course.
Good. Thank you.
Is anyone still wanting to come in and say something? Well, if not, Kathleen, once again, thank you very, very much for incredible. It was definitely a very good choice to start our talks. It was the best choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for questions and participation. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
If you like to have my slides, I can send it to you.
Yes, it would be nice. Although they can see them because it has been recorded.
Oh, it's recorded. Yes, of course. Yeah, but if you like to have the slides as such, I can send it to you.
Yes, I'd like to
share them with the participants in the talk.
Very well. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have
Bye-bye.
a
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
good,
Bye-bye.
good evening.